Did Meghan Markle just lose everything she's worked for in the royal family? It's a question no one saw coming. And yet, the evidence suggests the answer may shock the world. Tom Bower, the investigative author renowned for exposing some of the most guarded secrets in the palace, has reportedly obtained a secret document, a confidential report prepared by palace insiders, showing that Meghan may have misrepresented key events throughout her royal life. And if the report's contents are accurate, her titles, privileges, and carefully curated public image are all hanging by a thread, with January 1st now set as the day that could change her life forever. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Imagine the tension in Buckingham Palace. The quiet corridors where whispers have always carried more weight than shouts are suddenly buzzing. Advisors, staff, and members of the royal household are reportedly reviewing evidence that contradicts Meghan's public statements and memoirs. Some insiders are said to be stunned, others furious. And the public? They are about to witness a chapter in royal history that could rewrite everything we thought we knew about Meghan Markle. But let's step back for a moment. Why does this story matter now? Why is the world watching? Meghan Markle has been one of the most scrutinized figures in recent history, from her engagement to Prince Harry to the media frenzy surrounding Megxit and her life in California. Her narrative, as told in interviews and her best-selling memoir, painted a picture of struggle, misunderstanding, and a quest for independence. She framed herself as a modern woman navigating an ancient institution. Millions empathized. Millions supported her. Yet, the palace report reportedly tells a different story. Details suggest discrepancies in how Meghan described her experiences. Moments she framed as confrontations or slights may have been far more nuanced or even fabricated. And if the report is accurate, it is not just about minor exaggerations. We're talking about foundational claims, the kind that shape public perception and influence historical narrative. Tom Bower's access to these documents is unprecedented. No author before him has reportedly seen the full scope of these internal evaluations. And now, the world is waiting. Think about it. The life of a royal is never private, but there is a tacit understanding, a line that even tabloids respect, at least for a time. When that line is crossed, and when public statements clash with internal reports, the consequences are immediate and severe. According to sources, palace officials have begun a comprehensive review of Meghan's behavior and statements, weighing each against documented evidence. January 1st has been marked as the day that final decisions could be implemented, including the possible stripping of royal titles. The stakes have never been higher. And yet, the curiosity gap remains. What exactly did Meghan misrepresent? Were these mistakes innocent misunderstandings or deliberate attempts to shape a narrative? And how did Tom Bower uncover it? His reputation for meticulous research and relentless pursuit of truth has made him both respected and feared. Over the years, he has brought to light scandals that others dared not touch. If anyone can untangle the complexities of palace politics and Meghan's public statements, it's him. But here's the twist. This isn't just about Meghan. It's about the institution she married into, the legacy of the monarchy, and the optics of royal accountability. Every statement, every public appearance, every memoir entry, all of it is being measured against internal truths the public has never seen. And now, for the first time, the world may get a glimpse of what actually happened behind palace walls. Let's consider the timing. This revelation comes at a moment when Meghan's influence in media and philanthropy is strong. Her Netflix deals, public appearances, and social media presence are carefully curated. The palace report, however, threatens to undermine all of that carefully built image. It's not just a clash of narratives. It's a confrontation between perception and internal record. And perception, as Meghan knows well, drives public opinion, influence, and ultimately, legacy. Imagine for a moment the palace advisors reading through the documents. Pages filled with observations, staff testimonies, and cross-references to public statements. In some instances, the report reportedly contradicts Meghan's version of events so starkly that it raises serious questions about her credibility. Advisors are said to be stunned by the level of discrepancy, while legal teams prepare for potential fallout. And January 1st looms large, the day when decisions, long deliberated behind closed doors, may finally see the light of day. The public reaction is also an essential part of this story. Social media has already exploded with speculation. Headlines hinting at deception, insider revelations, and impending consequences have ignited debates across platforms. Some express shock, others disbelief. Loyal fans of Meghan are bracing for what may feel like an attack on their narrative, while critics see confirmation of what they have long suspected. And amidst this cacophony of opinions, one fact remains. The truth, as revealed in the palace report, may be far more consequential than anyone imagined. Now, let's talk about Tom Bower himself. He is no stranger to palace intrigue or to the public fascination with royal lives. His investigative work is methodical, precise, and unflinching. Bower reportedly spent months verifying sources, cross-referencing claims, and ensuring the credibility of every document before publication. Unlike tabloid speculation, Bower's findings carry weight precisely because of the rigor and depth of his research. And now, with access to this confidential report, he is positioned to deliver a revelation that could alter the trajectory of Meghan Markle's life, and perhaps her place in history. And there's something almost cinematic about it. The drama, the secrecy, the looming deadline. January 1st isn't just a date on the calendar. It is a narrative climax, the day when the palace may officially act on the findings, when titles could be stripped, when public perception could be irrevocably changed. For Meghan, it is a reckoning. For the royal family, it is a moment of decision. And for the public, it is the unveiling of a story they have long only glimpsed through curated interviews and carefully framed social media posts. But even as we tease the gravity of what's to come, questions remain. How much of this report will be publicly acknowledged? Will Meghan have an opportunity to respond before decisions are finalized? What does this mean for her media deals, for her social standing, for her family relationships? Every answer leads to more questions, and every question deepens the intrigue. This is why you should pay attention. Not because of tabloid fascination or gossip, but because the events unfolding have implications that ripple beyond a single individual. They touch on accountability, truth, and the delicate balance between personal narrative and institutional legacy. And while Meghan Markle has shaped her own story for years, the evidence revealed in Tom Bower's investigation may now rewrite it entirely. So, what exactly did the palace report uncover? Which events did Meghan misrepresent? And what happens next to her, to the royal family, and to the carefully constructed image she has cultivated? These are the questions that will guide our journey through this story, a story of deception, exposure, and perhaps ultimate reckoning. And just when you think you have a sense of what's coming, the details inside the report are said to be so shocking, so contradictory, that they will leave even the most seasoned observers questioning what they thought they knew. This isn't merely a story of a public figure facing scrutiny. It's a saga of intrigue, betrayal, and the collision between public persona and internal truth. For years, Meghan Markle has presented herself as the outsider navigating a centuries-old institution, the royal family, and their complex web of rules, traditions, and expectations. She told the world stories of struggles, perceived slights, and moments of emotional turbulence that painted her as a modern woman caught in an archaic system. But what if those stories were, at best, incomplete, and, at worst, outright misleading? That's the shocking reality suggested by a secret palace report recently obtained by investigative author Tom Bower. The report, described by insiders as highly detailed and meticulously compiled, was created by palace officials to document Meghan's behavior, interactions, and public statements throughout her time in the royal family. Its existence had been closely guarded. Very few eyes had seen it. The palace, historically protective of internal records, keeps such documents under tight security, viewing them as sensitive, often explosive information. The fact that Tom Bower, an author renowned for uncovering royal secrets, has obtained this report is unprecedented. And what he has revealed inside could redefine the narrative surrounding Meghan Markle entirely. Imagine, for a moment, the sheer audacity of accessing documents that were intended to remain hidden, perhaps forever. This is not a leak of casually shared gossip or anonymous tips. This is a formal, palace-prepared assessment, with entries verified by multiple staff members and internal communications cross-referenced for accuracy. It reportedly contains a granular account of events Meghan publicly described one way, while palace records suggest a very different reality. Tom Bower is said to have spent months vetting the authenticity of the report. Sources close to him describe a painstaking process, comparing statements, validating staff testimonies, and confirming timelines down to the hour. Bower's investigative method is precise and relentless, leaving little room for doubt. And the result? Evidence of major contradictions between Meghan's version of events and the reality recorded by those who witnessed them firsthand. What makes this report explosive isn't just its content, it's the timing. Meghan's titles, privileges, and public image are under scrutiny at a moment when she is highly visible on the global stage. The world is familiar with her Netflix deals, media appearances, and philanthropic endeavors. But this report, if accurate, threatens to undermine all of that, revealing inconsistencies that the palace has taken seriously enough to initiate a formal review. And as sources suggest, the conclusion of that review may be a decisive action. Titles could be stripped as early as January 1st. Inside the report, according to insider descriptions, are accounts that directly contradict some of Meghan's most publicized claims. Events she described as hostile or exclusionary appear in some cases to have been far less severe or entirely mischaracterized. In other cases, her portrayal of herself as an isolated figure within the family seems at odds with documented communications and eyewitness testimonies. The palace report reportedly doesn't just note discrepancies, it questions the accuracy of her narrative itself. Think about the implications for a moment. Meghan's story has shaped public opinion for years. It influenced the media, captivated global audiences, and built a persona of resilience and independence. Now, internal palace documents suggest that the foundation of that narrative may not be as solid as the public believed. And when Tom Bower published his findings, the public learned for the first time that these discrepancies were documented, verified, and taken seriously within the royal household. The secrecy surrounding this report is also telling. Palace officials rarely comment publicly on internal assessments. When they do, it's often in the form of carefully worded statements, designed to maintain discretion while protecting the institution's integrity. The fact that this report exists, that it has been reviewed, and that it is now in Bower's hands, signals the gravity of the situation. There is a reason January 1st is being watched so closely. It is the day when internal deliberations may turn into public action. So, how did Tom Bower gain access? That, too, is part of the intrigue. Sources indicate that his reputation for accuracy and discretion gave palace insiders the confidence to share portions of the report. In the world of royal reporting, trust is everything. Those who provide information risk their careers and credibility. That Bower is now in possession of this confidential document suggests that multiple insiders felt compelled to reveal the truth, perhaps to counteract what they perceived as a misleading public narrative. What exactly does the report contain? Sources suggest it includes detailed day-by-day accounts of Meghan's activities, statements she made publicly, and private communications with palace staff and family members. It cross-references media interviews, social media posts, and published memoir excerpts. Every contradiction is noted, every inconsistency highlighted. In some cases, the report reportedly paints a picture of a calculated attempt to shape public perception, rather than a candid recounting of events. Perhaps most striking are the alleged contradictions in Meghan's public statements. For instance, events she described as moments of discrimination or exclusion are shown, in palace records, to have involved voluntary participation, mutual decision-making, or even positive interactions. Staff testimonies reportedly indicate that some of Meghan's recollections were exaggerated or misrepresented. And in other cases, her own statements are at odds with documented communications within the royal household. What does this mean for the public narrative? For years, Meghan has been seen as a figure fighting against tradition, challenging the monarchy, and seeking independence. Millions empathized with her, and her story inspired debates about race, gender, and the pressures of royal life. Now, the palace report suggests a more nuanced reality. one that may complicate the simple narrative of victimhood she presented. And if the discrepancies are made public, the consequences for her reputation could be immediate and significant. Equally important are the emotional and human aspects behind these documents. The report reportedly includes first-hand observations from staff who worked closely with Meghan. These accounts are said to reflect frustration, confusion, and sometimes admiration. But they also suggest that staff struggled to reconcile public statements with private realities, often being placed in difficult positions as a result. The human element makes the revelations more compelling. It's not just about public image, it's about how her actions affected those around her. This chapter of the story also touches on palace protocol. Royals are expected to maintain decorum, discretion, and unity. The existence of this report suggests that Meghan's actions and statements were scrutinized not just for accuracy, but for their potential impact on the institution. Internal reports like this are rare, and when they exist, they are usually limited to factual observations rather than interpretative commentary. That this one reportedly questions the credibility of a royal figure is extraordinary, and the timing is not coincidental. As the world watches Meghan's media empire grow, as she continues to influence public opinion and entertainment culture, the palace appears to be moving decisively. January 1st isn't just symbolic. It represents a deadline for the formal review process to conclude. Advisors are said to be weighing the evidence meticulously, considering legal implications, and preparing for the potential fallout. The palace reportedly wants to ensure that any action taken is based on fact, properly documented, and defensible, both publicly and institutionally. Public curiosity is only intensifying. Social media speculation, opinion polls, and news coverage suggest that the world is eager to know what the report contains. Loyal supporters of Meghan are bracing for what could feel like an attack, while critics see confirmation of suspicions they have held for years. Meanwhile, palace watchers are focused on the procedural aspects. How will decisions be communicated, and what precedent will this set for future royal conduct? Tom Bower's involvement adds a layer of credibility to the story. Known for exposing controversial figures and high-profile secrets, Bower doesn't publish without substantial verification. His investigative rigor includes cross-referencing sources, validating documentation, and corroborating testimonies. For him to report on the palace findings indicates that the documents are not only genuine, but substantively significant. And that is what has captured global attention. The weight of these revelations cannot be understated. So what's at stake? For Meghan, her titles, privileges, and influence are all on the line. For the royal family, the credibility of the institution itself hangs in the balance. For the public, the narrative they've consumed for years may be challenged in profound ways. The palace report, once secret, now has the power to rewrite history as we know it. And as the report is analyzed, dissected, and debated, one fact remains clear: nothing is simple. The complexities of royal life, personal ambition, media influence, and public perception all collide in this story. The revelations contained within the report are not just administrative. They are personal, emotional, and deeply consequential. Meghan Markle has spent years crafting a narrative about her life within the royal family, a story of struggle, exclusion, and constant battle against an outdated institution. Her interviews, memoir, and public statements presented a consistent picture. She was the outsider, misunderstood, and often mistreated. Millions of people around the world empathized. Millions more were captivated by her story of resilience, modernity, and courage. But now, the secret palace report obtained by Tom Bower raises a deeply unsettling question. Was that narrative entirely accurate? Or was it carefully constructed to serve a personal agenda? Let's start with the basics. Meghan described her royal life as filled with tension and systemic challenges. She spoke openly about feeling isolated, misunderstood, and restricted by palace protocols. She recounted moments of perceived discrimination, lack of support from staff, and public humiliation. In her memoir, she portrayed herself as constantly under siege, navigating a world of rules and traditions that were foreign to her experience as an independent American woman. But the palace report paints a very different picture. According to sources familiar with the documents, Many of the events Meghan described as hostile or exclusionary are portrayed with far more nuance, or even the opposite tone, in official records and staff testimonies. Meetings and engagements she claimed were fraught with tension were, in some cases, documented as collaborative and positive. Complaints she voiced publicly were often addressed internally, with palace staff going out of their way to provide guidance and support. Take, for example, one high-profile event Meghan described as a moment of exclusion, where she felt sidelined by senior family members. In interviews, she spoke of humiliation and lack of respect, framing the experience as emblematic of her broader struggles. The palace report, however, reportedly shows that she was offered multiple opportunities to contribute, had input acknowledged by advisors, and participated in decision-making processes that contradict her public statements. Staff accounts suggest that her portrayal of the event emphasized conflict that simply did not exist. This pattern reportedly repeats across multiple incidents. A key theme emerges. Events that Meghan presented as confrontational or problematic are documented in palace records as neutral or positive interactions. Meetings, charity engagements, and family gatherings she described as moments of tension appear, according to internal reports, to have been ordinary or even supportive. In some instances, discrepancies are stark enough to suggest deliberate embellishment. The contradictions extend to her narrative of isolation. Meghan consistently portrayed herself as a solitary figure, struggling to find allies within the palace. Her interviews suggested that she was navigating hostility at every turn, with little guidance or understanding from staff or family. But the palace report reportedly indicates otherwise. Multiple aides, personal assistants, and advisors documented frequent communications with Meghan, providing guidance, support, and collaboration on official duties. In other words, she was far from isolated, at least according to the internal records. Now, consider the implications. If Meghan's public narrative diverges so dramatically from internal documentation, it raises questions about credibility and intent. Was she expressing genuine emotion and experience that staff misinterpreted? Or was the narrative shaped strategically for media impact, book sales, or public sympathy? Tom Bower's investigation does not speculate. It simply highlights the discrepancies, showing where her statements conflict with verified records. And the results are undeniably striking. Some of the contradictions are subtle, almost imperceptible to the casual observer. A phrase she uses in an interview might be factually inaccurate, but emotionally plausible. For example, she might describe a meeting as overwhelming or intimidating, while the report notes that it was routine and productive. Other contradictions are far more glaring, involving dates, locations, and events that are verifiable. In these cases, the palace report directly challenges the public story she told, showing that reality and narrative are not always aligned. Consider her portrayal of internal conflicts. Meghan often suggested that senior staff members were obstructive or unsupportive, implying systemic resistance. Yet, the palace report reportedly includes emails, memos, and first-hand accounts showing that staff actively engaged with her, offered advice, and accommodated her needs. Some staff reportedly expressed confusion over her public statements, indicating that they did not reflect the collaborative reality they experienced. And it's not just minor details or disagreements. According to insiders, the palace report systematically catalogs discrepancies that, when combined, create a narrative inconsistent with her public image. Engagements she framed as hostile, complaints presented as ignored, and conflicts described as personal attacks. All of these events are examined against internal records. The outcome suggests that Meghan's version of events may have exaggerated or misrepresented reality. What does this mean for public perception? Millions of people have invested emotionally in Meghan's story. Her portrayal as the brave outsider challenging tradition has influenced conversations about race, gender, and institutional change. If the discrepancies highlighted in the palace report are made public, it could dramatically shift public opinion. Supporters may feel betrayed or confused, while critics may view it as confirmation of long-standing suspicions. Either way, the stakes are enormous. Let's also discuss timing and context. Meghan has spent years cultivating her narrative. Her memoir, media appearances, and interviews were carefully orchestrated to convey a particular image. The palace report, however, represents a contemporaneous record, observations made at the time of events, not reconstructed after the fact. This distinction is crucial. While memoirs are inherently subjective, palace reports are designed to be factual and impartial. They record who said what, when, and in what context. In essence, they offer a contemporaneous perspective that can contradict retrospective accounts. The implications extend beyond reputation. Legal teams, public relations advisors, and media strategists will be analyzing these discrepancies carefully. If the palace's findings suggest misrepresentation, it could affect contracts, engagements, and future opportunities. Titles and privileges, always contingent on royal approval and conduct, could be reevaluated. And with January 1st approaching, time is running out. Emotional contradictions are also a key factor. Meghan's narrative often emphasizes personal struggle, frustration, and emotional pain. The palace report, however, suggests that some of these portrayals may have been exaggerated or misrepresented. Staff accounts reportedly indicate that she was often supported, guided, and treated with consideration. These conflicting perspectives create tension between the emotional story presented to the public and the factual record maintained internally. But what about intent? This is where Bauer's investigation is particularly compelling. He does not speculate about motives. Instead, he lays out the evidence and lets the discrepancies speak for themselves. By documenting the contrast between Meghan's version and the palace record, Bauer raises questions about credibility and narrative construction. Was the public persona carefully curated to generate sympathy and media attention? Or were the differences simply a result of perception and interpretation? Either way, the contradictions are striking. The chapter of Meghan's life examined in this report is extensive, covering engagements, family interactions, public appearances, and private communications. The sheer volume of material makes it difficult to dismiss the discrepancies as minor or accidental. Instead, they suggest a systematic divergence between public narrative and internal reality, a divergence significant enough to prompt formal review by palace advisors. Public perception matters, but so does history. Meghan's story has already influenced the global narrative about the monarchy, institutional privilege, and cultural change. If the palace report is accurate, the historical record may need to be reassessed. Events she described as exclusionary or hostile may have been collaborative and positive. Conflicts she presented as personal affronts may have been routine operational challenges. The potential impact on her legacy is profound. And yet, as dramatic as this chapter is, it only scratches the surface. The palace report reportedly contains more than just contradictions. It includes observations about her behavior, interactions with staff, and influence on public perception. These details deepen the story, adding layers of intrigue, complexity, and high stakes. And as Tom Bauer's investigation continues to unfold, the next chapters will reveal even more startling revelations. The tension is already building. January 1st is approaching. The palace review is ongoing. And the discrepancies between Meghan's public statements and the palace report suggest that the next moves could be decisive. For the public, for the monarchy, and for Meghan herself, the consequences are immense. For years, the royal family has operated under a strict code of confidentiality. Palace staff, from private secretaries to household aides, are bound by duty and discretion. But in the aftermath of Tom Bauer obtaining the secret palace report, several insiders are reportedly speaking, cautiously but definitively, about what they saw and experienced during Meghan Markle's time in the royal household. These testimonies add a layer of nuance and drama to an already explosive story, revealing a side of the royal saga that the public has never seen. Insiders describe Meghan as charismatic, intelligent, and driven, qualities that initially impressed those around her. Her ability to navigate media, public engagements, and charitable initiatives was widely admired. But alongside this admiration, staff reportedly observed behavior that was inconsistent with the narrative Meghan presented to the public. In interviews documented in the palace report, aides and advisors offered perspectives that, in many cases, directly contradicted Meghan's version of events. One palace insider, speaking under the condition of anonymity, reportedly described multiple occasions when Meghan's portrayal of events differed significantly from what actually occurred. According to this source, there were meetings and engagements that Meghan described as hostile or exclusionary, yet staff accounts indicated the opposite. They recalled instances of collaboration, support, and positive reinforcement that did not align with the narrative of isolation or adversity she shared publicly. Consider the example of a highly publicized engagement that Meghan described in interviews as humiliating and mismanaged. According to insiders, the reality was far different. Staff worked meticulously to prepare her for every detail, ensuring she understood protocols, schedules, and expectations. Any minor logistical issues were addressed promptly, and senior aides provided guidance at every step. The discrepancy between her public account and the behind-the-scenes reality raises serious questions about credibility and perception. Other insiders reportedly noted that Meghan was often highly strategic in her interactions. She carefully managed media access, appearances, and messaging. While this is not unusual for someone in the public eye, the palace report suggests that her public statements sometimes exaggerated conflicts or misrepresented intentions to frame herself as a victim of systemic resistance. According to these testimonies, her narrative often diverged from the factual record maintained by palace staff. A recurring theme in insider accounts involves the contrast between private and public behavior. Staff reportedly observed Meghan as professional, attentive, and engaged during official duties. Yet, in interviews and memoir excerpts, she sometimes described these same engagements as stressful, unsupported, or confrontational. This duality, the divergence between observed behavior and public storytelling, forms a central pillar of the controversy. One source described a particularly telling instance where Meghan publicly criticized palace procedures for limiting her autonomy. Internally, staff records indicated that she had been given extensive guidance and freedom in planning her engagements, but in interviews, she framed the process as restrictive. Staff reportedly found this frustrating, as they felt their efforts to support her were being publicly mischaracterized. This pattern, repeated across multiple events, suggests a deliberate shaping of public perception. But it's not just about minor misunderstandings. Some testimonies point to significant discrepancies in Meghan's accounts of personal interactions. For instance, she described moments of tension with senior staff as confrontational or even discriminatory. According to palace insiders, however, these interactions were professional and respectful. Staff members reportedly expressed confusion over her public statements, wondering why events they witnessed firsthand were portrayed so differently. The palace report also reportedly documents patterns of behavior observed by multiple insiders. Staff noted that Meghan was highly conscious of media narratives, often anticipating how her actions would be perceived publicly. While media awareness is not unusual, sources suggest that this heightened sensitivity may have influenced how she presented events in interviews and memoirs. Observers describe a calculated awareness of optics, a skill that, when combined with selective framing of events, created a narrative at odds with internal reality. Insiders also commented on Meghan's interactions with other family members. While she often described feeling isolated or unsupported, testimonies indicate frequent contact, guidance, and positive engagement with senior royals. According to the palace report, she was involved in collaborative decision-making, received mentorship, and was included in planning for significant events. These accounts suggest a more nuanced reality than the one conveyed to the public. Emotional dynamics also feature prominently in insider testimonies. Staff reportedly witnessed moments of vulnerability, stress, and even frustration from Meghan, human responses to a high-pressure environment. Yet, according to sources, these moments were sometimes amplified or reframed in her public narrative to emphasize hardship and adversity. The palace report appears to catalog these differences systematically, noting where perception diverged from reality. The insider testimonies also shed light on the complexity of Meghan's influence within the palace. While her media presence and public messaging were highly effective, they reportedly created tension behind the scenes. Staff described navigating competing demands, supporting Meghan's objectives, maintaining institutional protocol, and managing public relations simultaneously. These accounts suggest that the internal experience of working with Meghan was multifaceted, challenging, and at times frustrating, a far cry from the singular narrative of exclusion she presented externally. Another notable aspect of the testimonies involves staff reactions to public statements. According to sources, aides often expressed disbelief at Meghan's portrayal of events, noting that their efforts to assist and guide her were being publicly misrepresented. In some cases, this reportedly led to internal discussions about accountability and transparency, reinforcing the importance of accurate documentation in palace records. The contrast between public narrative and internal perception underscores the central tension highlighted in the palace report. It's also important to consider the credibility of these insiders. They are individuals who served in close proximity to Meghan, performing daily duties, managing schedules, and providing guidance. Their observations are grounded in first-hand experience rather than retrospective speculation. The palace report consolidates these accounts, cross-referencing statements to ensure consistency and accuracy. This methodological rigor lends weight to the testimonies and reinforces the seriousness of the findings. Some insiders reportedly expressed shock at the extent of Meghan's divergence from internal reality. While she was praised for intelligence, charisma, and initiative, staff were reportedly unsettled by the way events were framed publicly. According to the report, this was not merely occasional misrepresentation, but a recurring pattern across multiple engagements, interactions, and statements. The cumulative effect, insiders suggest, created a narrative that significantly deviated from the factual record. The emotional impact on staff is also worth noting. Aides and advisors reportedly felt conflicted, balancing loyalty, professionalism, and personal integrity. Witnessing a public narrative that misrepresented their efforts and the events they observed was reportedly frustrating and disheartening. Some insiders reportedly hoped that the truth would eventually emerge, lending context to Bauer's investigation and the palace report. Insider testimonies also highlight the delicate balance Meghan navigated between personal expression and institutional expectation. The palace report reportedly notes instances where she was guided to align messaging with protocol, only for her public statements to diverge from those recommendations. Staff described repeated attempts to clarify and communicate expectations, indicating a proactive approach to guidance that contrasts with her public portrayal of isolation and misunderstanding. In short, the insider testimonies collected in the palace report present a complex picture. Meghan Markle is intelligent, media-savvy, and strategic, but her public narrative frequently diverges from the reality observed by those closest to her. Staff accounts, combined with meticulously documented evidence, suggest that events she portrayed as hostile or exclusionary were often collaborative and professional. Discrepancies between perception and portrayal form the heart of the controversy, raising profound questions about credibility, intent, and narrative construction. And the most compelling part? These insider revelations are only the beginning. The palace report reportedly includes dozens of examples, covering everything from day-to-day interactions to high-profile engagements. Each testimony, each observation, adds another layer to the unfolding drama. A drama that continues to escalate as the January 1st deadline approaches. The palace report obtained by Tom Bauer reportedly lists dozens of events where Meghan Markle's public statements allegedly diverged sharply from what actually happened behind palace walls. These are not small, trivial moments. These are high-profile occasions, charitable engagements, family gatherings, and personal interactions that helped shape her public image. According to insiders, the discrepancies are so significant that palace officials felt compelled to review the implications for her role, privileges, and ultimately, her titles. One of the most cited examples involves a well-publicized charity gala Meghan attended early in her royal life. In interviews, she framed the evening as a humiliating experience, claiming she was excluded from key conversations and treated dismissively by senior family members. According to palace records, however, Meghan was actively included in planning, consulted on seating arrangements, and recognized for her contributions throughout the evening. Staff members reportedly described the event as smooth and professional, contradicting her narrative of isolation and exclusion. Another example centers on Meghan's account of a formal family meeting where she claimed she was given little guidance and felt unsupported. The Palace report, in contrast, indicates that she was provided detailed briefings, one-on-one coaching, and ongoing mentorship from experienced aides. Emails, memos, and scheduling documents corroborate this, showing proactive efforts by staff to integrate her into palace operations. Yet, in public statements, Meghan framed the situation as neglectful and dismissive, creating a stark contrast between reality and narrative. Even day-to-day interactions, according to insiders, were sometimes misrepresented. Meghan described small incidents, a scheduling change, a protocol reminder, a minor disagreement, as emblematic of systemic hostility. The Palace report reportedly catalogs these moments in detail, revealing that the staff were engaged, accommodating, and respectful, often going beyond expectations to support her. These examples suggest a pattern. Events were reframed in her public storytelling to emphasize conflict rather than collaboration. One particularly controversial event involved Meghan's role in coordinating a royal tour. In interviews and memoir passages, she portrayed the planning as chaotic, with obstacles imposed by senior family members and palace staff. According to the report, however, she received extensive logistical support, strategic advice, and operational guidance. Staff emails, scheduling documents, and travel records reportedly show that she was given considerable autonomy and resources, a reality that sharply contrasts with the narrative of obstruction she presented publicly. Another misrepresented moment, described as a confrontation with palace security, is also highlighted in the report. Meghan described the encounter as threatening and emblematic of a hostile environment. Palace records reportedly indicate that the situation was routine, handled professionally, and resolved without incident. Staff accounts suggest that Meghan's framing of the event amplified tension that was never present, contributing to a broader narrative of victimhood. Even ceremonial events were subject to misrepresentation, according to insiders. Meghan described moments of protocol as restrictive, implying she was intentionally excluded or marginalized. The Palace report, however, shows that she participated fully, received guidance on protocol, and was often praised for her contributions. These contradictions suggest a pattern of selective storytelling, where events were reshaped to fit a desired narrative rather than reflect factual reality. One high-profile example reportedly involves a meeting with senior members of the royal household during which Meghan claimed she was dismissed or ignored. Staff testimonies included in the Palace report describe the meeting as collaborative and productive, with Meghan's input valued and incorporated. Internal communications reportedly reflect appreciation for her insights, which contrasts starkly with the narrative she shared publicly. These misrepresented events extend beyond professional duties and engagements. Meghan also publicly discussed personal interactions, including moments with family members she framed as emotionally distant or unwelcoming. The Palace report reportedly contradicts several of these accounts, showing frequent communication, support, and positive engagement that does not align with the public story of isolation or conflict. According to insiders, these discrepancies are particularly striking when viewed cumulatively. One or two misrepresented events could be dismissed as differences in perception. But the Palace report reportedly documents dozens of examples spanning multiple years, creating a pattern that palace advisors considered serious enough to prompt formal review. The concern was not merely about factual accuracy. It was about consistency, credibility, and the potential impact on public perception of the monarchy. Some events, the report suggests, were misrepresented in ways that amplified controversy. Meghan reportedly framed logistical challenges, scheduling conflicts, and minor disagreements as systemic oppression or personal mistreatment. Staff accounts indicate that these incidents were routine operational issues, resolved quickly and professionally. The contrast between narrative and reality is so stark in some cases that palace officials reportedly questioned how these misrepresentations would affect public trust and institutional integrity. There are also financial and procedural implications. The Palace report reportedly details the extensive planning, coordination, and resources devoted to Meghan's engagements, contradicting her narrative that she was unsupported or constrained. These misrepresentations, if believed by the public, could have far-reaching consequences, not just for Meghan, but for the perception of the royal household as a whole. Another area of contention involves media strategy. Meghan described being trapped or manipulated by palace communications, yet insiders reportedly indicate she had considerable influence over messaging, media access, and public appearances. Staff accounts suggest she actively participated in planning and framing coverage, making the public narrative of restriction or exclusion increasingly inconsistent with the internal reality. Even minor social interactions, according to the palace report, were sometimes reframed. Staff noted that casual disagreements, scheduling conflicts, or protocol reminders were portrayed in public as deliberate affronts or hostility. These instances, while perhaps emotionally charged in the moment, were routine and professional. Yet they were amplified in her storytelling to reinforce a narrative of struggle and adversity. The palace report reportedly also scrutinizes Meghan's accounts of charitable work. She often described obstacles or barriers imposed by palace staff or protocols. In reality, insiders indicate that she received guidance, logistical support, and recognition for her contributions. Multiple engagements, events, and initiatives that were portrayed publicly as difficult or restrictive were, according to internal documentation, well supported and organized. The cumulative effect of these misrepresented events is significant. They challenge the consistency and credibility of Meghan's public narrative and raise questions about intent, perception, and accountability. The palace report reportedly highlights these contradictions systematically, creating a comprehensive picture that differs markedly from the one the public has been presented with. For palace advisors, these findings reportedly prompted a formal review of her role, privileges, and titles. If the discrepancies outlined in the report are substantiated, the implications are enormous. Titles could be stripped, privileges curtailed, and public perception reshaped. The stakes, already high, continue to rise as January 1st approaches, the day when decisions based on this evidence could finally be implemented. And the drama doesn't end with documentation. Insider testimonies suggest that staff reactions to the misrepresentations were mixed. Frustration, disbelief, and at times admiration for her strategic awareness. They reportedly felt caught between loyalty, duty, and the need for truth, creating an atmosphere of tension and anticipation within the palace. The pattern of misrepresented events also raises broader questions. If one royal figure can shape public perception so dramatically, what does that mean for accountability, transparency, and trust in the monarchy? And if these discrepancies are publicly confirmed, how will it affect Meghan's influence, credibility, and media presence? The palace report appears to answer these questions implicitly, documenting not just misrepresentation, but the systemic consequences of these actions. And just when it seemed the story couldn't get more explosive, the report reportedly contained revelations about events so high-profile, so contradictory to public accounts, that advisors describe them as potentially career-defining. They involve interactions with senior royals, global engagements, and charitable initiatives, moments that shaped Meghan's public image and influenced how millions perceived her. The revelations in Tom Bower's obtained palace report didn't just ripple through the media. They shook the corridors of Buckingham Palace itself. For an institution steeped in tradition, where discretion and protocol are paramount, handling internal contradictions about a royal figure is a high-stakes operation. According to sources familiar with the matter, the palace's response to the report has been meticulous, calculated, and unprecedented in scope. At the heart of the palace response is a formal review process. Advisors, legal teams, and senior officials reportedly convened immediately upon learning of the discrepancies documented in the report. Their goal: to verify the findings, assess the potential impact on the monarchy, and determine an appropriate course of action. Unlike standard internal audits, this review is both procedural and deeply strategic, designed to preserve the institution's credibility while addressing a sensitive and highly publicized situation. According to insiders, the review team is evaluating multiple dimensions: factual accuracy, public perception, legal implications, and the consistency of Meghan's narrative against palace records. The fact that a formal review was initiated at all is telling. Royal advisors rarely act decisively without overwhelming evidence, particularly in matters involving a high-profile figure. The discrepancies documented in the palace report reportedly met this threshold, prompting immediate and serious attention. One key aspect of the response reportedly involves cross-referencing Meghan's public statements with the palace report. Advisors are examining interviews, memoir excerpts, and media appearances, comparing them against verified records, staff testimonies, and internal communications. The goal is to map out where the narrative diverges from reality and evaluate the potential consequences for both Meghan and the monarchy. Palace insiders describe a tense, meticulous environment. Teams are reportedly working long hours, reviewing emails, memos, and meeting notes, and consulting with legal and communications experts. Every word, every claim, is being scrutinized. The sensitivity of the situation cannot be overstated. Decisions made now will shape public perception, influence media coverage, and potentially redefine Meghan's position within the royal family. Sources indicate that the palace response has not been limited to documentation. Senior officials reportedly held private discussions with Meghan's representatives to clarify statements, understand her perspective, and explore reconciliation options. These meetings, described as formal yet discreet, were intended to provide her with an opportunity to respond to the discrepancies before any public action was taken. This approach aligns with long-standing palace protocol, addressing issues internally first, preserving discretion, and maintaining institutional integrity. Despite these efforts, insiders report that tension within the palace has been palpable. Staff who contributed to the palace report reportedly expressed concern over how the discrepancies would be received by the public and media. Advisors, meanwhile, faced the challenge of balancing loyalty to the institution with the need for transparency and accountability. The stakes were enormous, and the pressure to act decisively yet judiciously intensified with every passing day. Public communications have been notably cautious. Official statements from Buckingham Palace have been minimal, carefully worded, and highly strategic. The institution has avoided commenting directly on the specifics of the report, instead emphasizing that all royal activities adhere to established protocols and that matters concerning individual members are handled internally. This measured response reflects the palace's desire to manage the narrative without escalating public controversy. Legal teams have also reportedly been involved in shaping the palace's response. They are evaluating potential implications related to contracts, media appearances, and public engagements. If discrepancies in Meghan's narrative are substantiated, there could be consequences extending beyond titles and privileges, potentially affecting media deals and commercial partnerships. Advisors are reportedly preparing for scenarios ranging from private resolutions to public announcements, each with carefully considered messaging strategies. The palace's strategic response reportedly includes contingency planning for January 1st, the date by which titles and official privileges could be reassessed. Advisors are preparing documentation, internal statements, and communication plans to ensure that any decisions are supported by evidence, defensible legally, and coherent publicly. This level of preparation underscores the seriousness with which the palace views the situation. Insider accounts also highlight the emotional dimension of the response. Senior officials reportedly grappled with a mix of frustration, concern, and resolve. For decades, Buckingham Palace has navigated crises with discretion, balancing tradition with modern media pressures. The Meghan Markle situation, amplified by the palace report and Bowers' revelations, has tested this balance in unprecedented ways. Advisors reportedly recognized that public confidence, staff morale, and institutional credibility all hung in the balance. The palace response also reportedly involved strategic coordination with communications experts. Messaging to the public, media outlets, and international observers needed to be precise. Officials reportedly debated whether to emphasize procedural rigor, institutional values, or factual accuracy. Every word, according to sources, was scrutinized to avoid unintended interpretations, leaks, or misrepresentation. This strategic layering reflects the palace's awareness that perception is as important as reality. Another critical element of the response was internal reconciliation. Staff who contributed to the palace report reportedly met with senior officials to ensure their accounts were properly documented, corroborated, and ready to withstand scrutiny. This process aimed to validate the findings and prepare for potential challenges from Meghan's representatives or media inquiries. Accuracy, credibility, and internal consistency were paramount. Publicly, the palace has maintained a posture of calm neutrality, avoiding dramatic statements or sensational commentary. This approach, insiders suggest, is deliberate. By refraining from immediate public criticism, the institution retains control over timing, messaging, and the narrative arc. The palace understands that any public misstep could magnify media scrutiny, provoke backlash, or complicate internal deliberations. At the same time, the palace reportedly prepared for potential media fallout. Advisors anticipated headlines, public reactions, and online discourse, recognizing that the revelations in Bauer's investigation could ignite debate on social media and news platforms worldwide. Contingency planning included legal responses, clarifying statements, and internal messaging to ensure that staff were aligned with the official narrative. Timing has been a crucial factor in the palace response. The report's findings coincided with a period of heightened public visibility for Meghan Markle, including media projects, interviews, and philanthropic campaigns. Palace officials reportedly considered the potential for public distraction or misinterpretation, carefully planning the review timeline to coincide with the January 1st milestone. This strategic alignment underscores the importance of deliberate timing in royal decision-making. Interestingly, insiders suggest that the palace's response has been both reactive and proactive. Reactive, in the sense that immediate attention was required to verify the report and assess discrepancies. Proactive, in the sense that the institution has anticipated potential outcomes, prepared for media scrutiny, and developed a comprehensive plan for public communication and internal action. This dual approach demonstrates the palace's capacity to navigate complex crises while preserving institutional stability. One particularly notable aspect of the response reportedly involves engagement with senior family members. Private consultations reportedly took place to review findings, discuss implications, and formulate recommendations. These conversations, described by insiders as frank and thorough, reportedly addressed the credibility of the palace report, potential public perception issues, and the broader impact on institutional reputation. Family members' perspectives were considered integral to decision-making, highlighting the high stakes involved. Another dimension of the response concerns public trust. Advisors reportedly recognized that the palace must maintain credibility with both domestic and international audiences. Discrepancies between Meghan's narrative and internal records, if left unaddressed, could erode confidence in the institution's ability to govern, communicate, and maintain transparency. The review process, therefore, serves not only as an internal corrective mechanism, but also as a safeguard for public perception. The palace response has also reportedly included coordination with external experts, including media consultants, legal advisors, and protocol specialists. These professionals were tasked with ensuring that every aspect of the review, from documentation to potential public statements, adhered to best practices and minimized risk. This multi-layered approach reflects the palace's understanding of the complex interplay between internal operations, public narrative, and media scrutiny. While the palace has remained outwardly calm, insiders suggest that behind closed doors, the environment has been charged with urgency. Advisors reportedly work long hours, carefully evaluating each discrepancy, considering potential consequences, and preparing for every possible scenario. The stakes are immense. The outcome could affect not only Meghan Markle but the credibility, stability, and public perception of the monarchy itself. Ultimately, the palace response appears to be comprehensive, deliberate, and strategically timed. Advisors are balancing internal scrutiny, legal considerations, family input, and public perception, all while navigating a high-profile situation with far-reaching implications. Every decision, every communication, and every action is calculated to protect the institution, address discrepancies, and ensure that January 1st, the milestone date for potential title reassessment, arrives with clarity, authority, and impact. The palace report obtained by Tom Bower doesn't just document discrepancies and misrepresentations. It carries potentially monumental legal implications. For Meghan Markle, these implications extend far beyond public opinion or media scrutiny. They strike at the very privileges, titles, and roles she holds within the royal family. With January 1st looming as a potential turning point, palace legal advisors reportedly moved quickly to assess how the findings could affect her official standing. To understand the gravity, it's important to note how royal titles and privileges are granted. Titles like Duchess, ceremonial honors, and patronages are not simply symbolic. They are legal instruments granted by the sovereign, subject to discretion, protocol, and conditions of conduct. While the monarchy often maintains a degree of flexibility in granting these roles, there is also precedent for reassessment or revocation if a member's behavior is deemed incompatible with institutional expectations or public trust. According to sources familiar with the matter, the palace report contains documented evidence suggesting that Meghan's public statements and representations may have materially mischaracterized events within the royal household. From a legal perspective, this raises several questions. Could misrepresentation of internal processes or professional interactions justify the stripping of privileges or titles? How might her public narrative intersect with contractual obligations related to royal duties, media projects, and patronages? Legal advisors reportedly analyzed every statement, memoir excerpt, and public interview, comparing them against verified internal records. The goal